Here's what I learned. I learned from those 2 years on that committee 3 essential things about psychiatric diagnosis. One, it's not scientific. There is no scientific evidence that there is such a thing as schizophrenia, read Bob Whitaker's book, Man in America, or borderline personality disorder, or bipolar disorder. How many people do you know who come up and say, my name's Mary, I'm bipolar? And yet there is no scientific evidence that there are such entities. Do people suffer? Do they suffer in a myriad of ways and in different kinds of combinations? Yes. But our whole country has been so psychiatrized that most people believe that there are these real entities. And so what happens is the therapists, and often the people themselves who are suffering, are trying to figure out, so which of these entities am I? And then once we know what I am, then we'll know how to fix me. And of course, it's usually with drugs, but often with other kinds of things that are harmful. So first of all, I learned on the inside that psych diagnosis is not scientific. I learned that getting a label doesn't increase your chances of reducing your suffering. In fact, it often gets in the way, because all the time is spent on what label do they fit, instead of what else do I need to know about them? And what are the various kinds of things that might help? And the third thing that I learned was that getting a diagnosis, just getting a diagnosis, can lead to a wide array of kinds of harm. So, I'll come back to that in a bit. But since there's no science, how do the decisions get made about what are the diagnostic categories and what should they be called and what should be their lists of criteria and so on? Well, there's no science, there's no objectivity. So all these decisions are based on subjective opinions of the therapist who happens to be seeing you at that moment, and they're based on very political and financial considerations and considerations of power. One quick example, premenstrual dysphoric disorder was an idea invented by 2 guys on a fishing trip. Robert Spitzer was one of them. And, well, of course, it was pathologizing something that can only happen to women. There's no evidence that it's hormonally caused. And even when I say it, I'll put air quotes around it. Thank you, John, because there's no evidence it's a real entity. So a study was done that went as follows. They took the criteria for PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and they gave this as a checklist to 3 groups of people. Women who said, I have no premenstrual problems of any kind. Women who said, oh, I get crazy premenstrually, or whose therapists had diagnosed them with it. And men. And they didn't tell them why they were giving them this list of symptoms. And they said, just fill out the list every day for 2 months, because the DSM said that's how you know if they have PMDD. Well, of course, no psychiatrist waits 2 months. It's like 7 minutes, 10 minutes, and then they diagnose you. But anyway, if there were such a thing as premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and if the DSM people had discovered its symptoms, its criteria, then those 3 groups would have answered those questions very, very differently. Well, there were no differences. And the DSM-4 people knew that, and they put it in anyway. And now, in the advertisements for the DSM-5, they're very proudly announcing, this is a way to sell the book, that PMDD used to be in the provisional appendix, but now it's in the main text. It's a point of pride with them.